Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Contact Center Metrics. I'm Rachel and I'll be your webinar chairperson for today. So we've got a very active or busy agenda coming up today. Delighted to be joined by two industry experts. We've got Paul Wield, a contact center innovator. Welcome, Paul.
Hello, hi there.
So Paul, what is your kind of background on contact center metrics?
I think this year I've celebrated my 25th year in the contact center industry. So that goes all the way back to the days that we first stopped walking down the high street to buy insurance and sort of picked up the phone. Lived through that that kind of dawn of call centers as we called them at the time, and been involved on the technology side and in consultancy, and very much now enjoy working as part of client teams. So interim roles is what I've been doing most of it recently.
Thank you very much. And Mike Murphy from Genesis, delighted to have you back on our webinar schedule.
Hi Rachel, and hi everybody. It's good to be back and looking forward to this webinar. I like the subject of contact center metrics. I think it's a very much a always evolving topic. So looking forward to the webinar.
Great. And for those of you, there's going to be lots of information. I know lots of people have lots of questions and want to share the replay with their team. We are taking a recording today and slides from both the speakers will be available later on this afternoon on the following page. We are doing our discussion on the chat room. For those people who aren't already logged in, it's callcenterhelper.com/chat. And the added bonus of logging in is that all the slides are already available to download. Just click this button here, and you can also download the chat log at the end of the session. Another reason to log into our chat room is that we are giving away a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates for the best tip. Sadly, I'm not in the office today, so I can't show you the champagne. Sadly, they won't let me take it home. So you just use hashtag question for a question and hashtag tip to share your top tips for contact center metrics. So we have been asking in the chat room which metrics are most important to you. There's been a huge response of, as actually Paul was saying before, of loads of different multi-channel metrics coming through. So I think we'll start off with a poll of how frequently do you access metrics in your contact center role. So let me just launch this one now. So the answers are real-time, hourly, daily, weekly or monthly. It's just one answer, so we'll wait and find out. So Paul, what are you expecting or what are you hoping to see?
Well, I'm hoping that people choose the most frequent time that they actually access the metrics. So I'd like to see it nearer the real-time end of the spectrum rather than the monthly end of the spectrum. But we will wait and see.
Okay, Mike, any bets on?
Well, I mean, it's all about the role, isn't it? So from that perspective, I anticipate, like Paul, it'll be around the top end of the options, but we'll see.
Okay, I will share the results with everyone. So 41% real time, 39% daily, 13% weekly, and 4% hourly and monthly. So, sorry, my Alexa just decided to kick in the background. Very unhelpful. So, Paul, was that something that you were expecting to see?
Yeah, I mean that's certainly encouraging that a number of the people attending today are using metrics in real time. I suspect that is because they're in operational roles, and the daily performance reporting may well be some constraints around how they actually how those organisations are able to provide the information, and I think that's something that that Mike will be touching on later on.
Fab. So thank you very much for that. So I'll hide that. So delighted to pass the baton over to Paul to share his thoughts on contact center metrics. So I'll just make you the presenter.
Okay, I'll bring that up. Can you see that fine, Rachel?
I can, yes. There we go, full screen.
Okay, so contact center metrics. Are you measuring the right things, or are you going against the crowd, as the image would actually sort of show us? And I guess the evolution of metrics, kind of going back to my formative days in the industry, was a very simple saying that you can't manage what you can't measure, and I think that's certainly been very true within the contact center industry, mainly because there's actually so much that we can measure in terms of calls and emails that we get in from a demand perspective, and then how we're actually managing our resources and the utilization compared to other departments within your organization. I fully expect that you have a much more holistic view of what your frontline teams are doing in the contact center than would be true for elsewhere in the organization. I think what we've seen as time has moved forward is that what started out as efficiency-based activities, so measuring duration and call volumes and AHT and so forth, allied to an effectiveness measure, which going back to whether you're a service center, that might be about first time fix. If you're a sales center, it might be about conversion rate. So those are the measures that if I was doing this presentation 15 years ago, that's what we would have been talking about. I think what's happened more recently, and I'd say this has been an evolution over the last 10 years, is that we're now starting to take customer experience much more importantly, and therefore we've got a much broader perspective of how we want to measure and understand what's going on in our sort of contact center. And I'll drill into this in more detail, but I basically think it's about three things. It's about measuring what our customers want from us. It's about measuring what our staff want from us and making sure that we look after them, as well as the wider organizational objectives from sort of finance, IT and so forth. So drilling into each of these in turn, I think customer experience is about changing the balance, the old to the new, where we are then taking looking through our performance through the lens of our sort of customers, and our customers now expect us to be, much more multi-channel, so they consume information in different ways. Certainly, there's a digital element, and I'll talk into a case study on that later on. It's also true that that would include social media as a way of being able to understand the sentiment that people have about our brand, and also social media is potentially an outlet where people complain, and we shouldn't forget good old-fashioned written communication. So not just sort of white mail, so sort of snail mail, and there are still, there's still the need to provide information in a written form, particularly for any sort of legal transaction. But also now the more digital forms of sort of written communication, so email, structured forms. So how do we then measure that? Well, we'll ask you to answer that question in a little while, but I think it's going to be some combination of internal quality measures. So that's where you would score an agent as to how well they perform the tasks that you need to do, and there may be a compliance angle there, particularly that would be true in financial services, as well as the tone of voice, the empathy that the agent uses in that response. Certainly, some organisations use mystery shopping, so that's where you get a third-party organisation to contact you and to actually rate their experience. Or it could be part of a voice of the customer, so actually sending something out to a customer after they've completed the transaction with you. So that could be by phone, it could be by email, and that's all part of gathering sort of customer feedback. A lot of that latter part has come about because organisationally we're beginning now to measure customer advocacy. And I think other webinars would have touched on discussion around the merits of the Net Promoter Score, where essentially you You consider whether someone is an advocate or a detractor, and you've got a way of benchmarking yourself. But there are other advocacy measures, or there are other customer measures like customer effort, etc., which are particularly sort of popular sort of these days. So I think the first kind of paradigm to metrics would actually be understanding the customer. The second element is around how your staff feel. And I think it is a truism. It's what we all believe to be the case, that if our organisations strive to provide a very high level of customer satisfaction, then that all starts by having great staff who are very motivated to actually help customers achieve that outcome, and are also very engaged with that sort of purpose. I think if you have that type of workforce in your contact centre, then you've got a great DNA to then achieve the outcome that you're sort of looking for. It's more tricky to decide how you want to actually measure and have a barometer of your staff experience. It often starts with HR doing an annual employee survey, but I think contact centres these days are much more regularly taking the temperature check of their staff. They can do that through having regular feedback, which is the kind of one-to-one reporting between team leaders and agents. They also can provide information and feedback based on having the right environment. So how well do you solicit information? How well do you get good ideas from your frontline staff? Remembering that they probably speak to more customers in a day than your managing director does in a sort of year. So give them the opportunity to tell you via what they hear from customers about anything that's kind of broken or sort of could be improved. I think also it's about engaging staff to make sure that they understand not what good looks like in terms of an organisational outcome. Did I actually sell what I was meant to my quota or my target today? But actually from a customer perspective, did I help them to achieve the outcome that they wanted to achieve? And if you do the latter, then the sort of internal metrics hopefully follow suit. And lastly, we do need to have a little bit of stick within the operation, because it's all about being able to manage high volumes of contacts, whether that's by phone or email or social media. We do need to be able to plan that demand so that we schedule our resources correctly, and then just make sure that agents are in the right place at the right time. So that's a little bit of stick to make sure that people are doing the right tasks. Rachel, I think we want to get some feedback from the audience now. Can I hand back to you?
Yes, I will. So we actually have a poll coming up. So let me just share this with you. We're asking, which of the following do you use that supports the generation of metrics and insights into customers and agents? It is a select all that apply. So the answers are regular quality assessments of calls and emails, post-contact centre surveys, so customer surveys following a call or an email, daily agent performance reporting made available to team managers to review individual performance, workforce management adherence to track agent activity versus the required schedule, and speech analytics, so looking for trends and issues in call quality. Paul, I don't know whether you'd had any thoughts on what you were expecting to see?
Well, I hope to see some 70 and 80%ers in there.
Okay. Any particular ones, or are you keeping them close to your chest?
Well, I think more towards the top of the list. I think those are the things that I would certainly expect. We have an audience, particularly those people into operations. I would certainly hope that the sort of top three are in there.
And Mike, any thoughts?
Yeah, kind of a bit like the what was interesting for me for the last poll really was the clarity around real time and weekly. That was kind of interesting to see. On this one, I am on the technology side, I suppose. So I'm curious how speech analytics will fare, just out of curiosity. I expect, like Paul, that the ones close to the top should be scoring high, but we have had analytics around with us for quite a while now, so I'm curious to see what the audience view of its take up and its use actually is. So that'll be interesting to see.
I will share the results now. So 73% say regular quality assessments, 71% say daily agent performance reporting, 56% say post-contact surveys, 53% say workforce management adherence, and 17% speech analytics. Mike, was that something that you were hoping to see, or kind of?
Yeah, actually it was. Yeah, I'm kind of pleased with that, really, because I think we have to use all of these tools to help us get the best results for our customers. So from that perspective, we kind of need to be able to leverage the right tools, and I think this is a good reflection of them and how they're being used. So yeah, I'm very encouraged.
Yeah, Paul, are you feeling the same?
Yeah, the 71 and 73, that sort of floats my sort of boat.
Okay, great. So I will pass the baton over to you. Just a reminder to the audience that we are coming after Paul's presentation to our kind of questions section, or if you wanted to share your top tips. So just a reminder to put them into the chat room. So Paul, you should have control now. Fab, yep, we can see that.
Okay, right. So in terms of, just make sure I can see it as well. Here we go. So the third element towards almost a balanced scorecard of measures is around the wider stakeholder experience. So this is very much about recognizing that the contact center doesn't exist in a sort of vacuum, that very much, you are a support department to the organization. Yes, you consume some finance, so you have some costs, but more importantly, it's the value that you provide. So in terms of trying to understand how the accountants might measure it in terms of cost per contact, then the things that you can do in your roles every day is making sure that resources are being used appropriately. So a lot of that's about utilization and occupancy, but also that your frontline staff are focused on the right things. So, simple inquiries where there is a digital option available. Really, I think the role is to be educating and encouraging those customers to adopt those channels, and particularly when you're busy, being able to deflect and help a customer to help themselves. That's definitely a good sort of outcome. Also, we need to recognise that the organisation is never ever perfect. It can always improve, and I think that will manifest itself in terms of failure demands coming into your operation. So that's where customers ring up or get in contact because something hasn't happened, delivery hasn't happened, and what you really need to do is, obviously from a customer service perspective, is resolve that issue there and then, but actually take a step back and say, well, what is it that caused that late delivery in the first place? What is it that we need to do differently with our colleagues elsewhere in the organisation to understand that and sort of fix it? So I've now got a couple of case studies, and what I want to illustrate in this next section is having the metrics is one thing, but it's what you do with them that, in my world, is actually far more important. And I'm going to dwell on AHT, and in the prelude to this, as we were just waiting to start up, there are a number of people put into the chat room that AHT is something that they actually measure. And it's been a topic of debate within the industry in terms of the pros and cons of AHT. And what I would say is that it definitely has a role to play, particularly if you're trying to manage capacity. But I never think that it should be an explicit agent measure. So I don't think that you should be telling an agent, I want you to have a less than 280-second AHT. I think that's almost meaningless. What I wanted to do is just illustrate, in terms of the theme of improvements, is go back to a client I had an interim role with a couple of years back. It was a global airline. They had a couple of call centres in the UK operating 24/7. And the issue we had at that time when I started was a kind of a legacy of under-resourcing, so cutbacks post-recession that had caused a situation where too many calls were being lost and sort of abandoned. And what we had to do as a management team is fix that. And yes, there was some budget to increase staff numbers, but the view was we ought to be able to manage our way out of it through other measures. So what we said was, well, if we could get AHT down, then that would release some capacity, which would mean that we could achieve our service level with the resource limits that we currently had. So what we did as a team is really look to identify all those ways that we could do that, and then get our staff on board to help us. And we did it without ever mentioning the three-letter acronym AHT. What we said to our staff was, why do you need to put a customer on hold? Is it because you're looking up knowledge? Is it because the calls have been routed to you incorrectly? You've only got a sales skill and you've got a service call and you have to transfer it. So identified all of those reasons that were causing call transfers, and we had a whole improvement program to sort of drive those down. We were also aware of RAP. So AHT is composed of three things. It's the talk time, which is the valuable bit. It's the hold time, which is not valuable, and it's the RAP time, which is necessary to be able to correctly log and document in your CRM system or in your transactional system. But actually, what we were finding was, because we were very busy at the time of high demand, agents just got a bit slack. They would let that wrap time creep up so they can have a little bit of a break. And what we did was say, that's not the right behaviour. We'll roster you better to give you those breaks. But what we want you to do is, in terms of earning your payments, your bonus payments, we just want you to be aware of that one particular element. And once we'd actually got that wrap time down, it was a very successful campaign with some really nice prizes for the agents. Then, funnily enough, it actually stayed at that new level. So we sort of fixed it once, and then it was done forever. We also did a lot with call routings on the technology side. What we identified was that we would let calls try and find a primary skill for 60 seconds. So in other words, a service call would go to a service agent, a sales call to a sales agent. And what we empirically through analytics determined was, if that was true, so we got a service call to a service agent, then guess what? The service agent could deal with that inquiry more quickly and with a higher degree of satisfaction. Likewise, if we got a sales call through to a sales agent, we had a higher conversion rate. So we actually started playing with the routine to get to a stage where we had a higher proportion of primary skilled agents answering inquiries, and that also helped us. And lastly, we use our quality team. We never once said to agents what an AHT metric was in terms of a number, but we did say, think about whether the talk time that you're having with the customer is actually appropriate. So that was about understanding the personality style of the customer. So if someone's a bit of a functional controller, they just want things to happen, bang, bang, bang. If they're much more of a thinker and a feeler, then, if we were talking to them about the destination that they were traveling to, then by all means engage them, get them enthused about that. And so our focus was about getting the agents to take, be more self-aware around what was the right thing to do in terms of actually answering those queries. And we never had a, can I help you with anything else type script. That was never actually part of it. And the results then on capacity were really quite astounding. So a slightly busy slide, but the kind of solid purple line is what the AHT was after we'd made the improvements. And so this was a year-on-year check, and the airline industry is quite seasonal. The dotted line, which you can see from July and August onwards, is much higher, was what the AHT was the previous year. So you can start to see, as we moved through the transformation, a larger difference, so a much lower AHT in the second year, so when we were actually making our improvements. And also the red and green dashes, what they show you are the range, and you can see for the second year, once we've made these improvements, a narrowing of the range. What that meant was the outcome was fantastic. We saved 100 seconds off a 490 second AHT, so about 20% capacity release. But more importantly, everything that we did stuck. So in other words, once we'd achieved that by that December, I know by keeping in touch with that client that they continued to have AHT at those levels, moving forward. So it does show you that an AHT as a capacity measure, if you go about it in the right way with your frontline teams, you can make a real difference. The second case study is something that Rachel asked me to touch upon, which is what and how do we measure digital these days? And this is an example from a client who are a retail bank, and what we wanted to do with them is just understand how their adoption of internet and mobile banking was going. So we actually started to measure from the marketing side, how many of our customers had subscribed to that service, and then secondly, by looking at usage statistics, we could see that of those that had subscribed, 65% of them were current users. So that gave us some clues then around, from an education perspective, what real customers were doing, whether they needed to be promoted to the service to sign up, or whether they need to be reminded of the benefits. The bit where we started to use analytics was actually the box around, do they need support? What we found was that 41% of customers who were trying to use digital services did need some sort of support. And as you can imagine, that was a very high number of contacts and chats coming into the contact center. So we then started to drill down and say, well, why is that happening? Well, some of it was failure demand, which was that actually the app wasn't working at certain points in time. Some of it was just the fact that the functionality roadmap wasn't what customers wanted to use the app for. So in other words, they could see a balance, they could make a transfer, but they couldn't, for example, make a transfer to someone who they hadn't. They couldn't set up a new payment, so that they couldn't use it for something different. They had to go to a different channel for that. And some of it was sort of education, in that they got halfway through trying to actually transact and didn't know that they could do other sort of functions. So that insight gave us a number of improvement initiatives that we could focus on. We could work with marketing about when was the right time to actually promote the service, and in fact, part of that outcome was not to do it now. They waited until they'd had some more releases, some more functionality, and then they started to sort of promote it. And then to be all over when, to have a real strong liaison with the digital team, particularly when there were service issues. A lot of the development was agile, and that was great because it meant that we got new functionality quite quickly, but it didn't always land in the way that customers were expecting, and that's just part of the rationale for understanding what's sort of going on. So I think with digital these days, I would say there isn't a single metric. I would say you need to understand about those that have got access to it, and very much their sort of usage. And again, the role that the front line can play is feeding back to stakeholders like the digital team, like the product sort of proposition team, what needs to happen next in order to sort of drive take up. Because the good news is that you're actually taking away the kind of low value calls or low value contacts the more that customers use these emerging channels. And back to you, Rachel.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. Some very interesting case studies shared with us, and lots of questions coming in, so we'll try and get through everybody's questions. Toby's asked, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on schedule efficiency and its measurement. Paul, I don't know whether you have any thoughts on that?
So schedule efficiency, so once you've actually locked down your roster, so when agents are in, you schedule breaks and meetings and sort of off phone time. And what you then want to know and again, the technology can enable this by taking feeds from telephony and email systems, etc., is, are those agents doing the things at the time that were actually planned? So yes, adherence allows you then from real time to manage the floor to make sure that people are doing the things that you kind of wanted them to. So that's the first part of the answer. I think the second thing is then saying, have you got the schedule right in the first place? And that's very much the role that the workforce management team provide. The value they add is about saying, how do we tweak the roster to be able to align better to demand? Have we got the flexibility of our resources to do that? And if we have exceptional situations because unexpected peaks occur, then have we got the capability then to bring more staff in quickly? Whether that is through getting back office staff to log on, whether it's offering overtime at ends of shifts, whether it's moving lunchtime breaks around because you're struggling to meet service level at that time. So I think there's the operational bit, and then there's the analytical bit.
Thank you very much. Mutaz has said he's got an opinion. It depends on the metrics. Some of them should be real time and some can be daily or weekly. So I think this is from the back of the poll. So kind of what both Paul and Mike were saying, that it completely depends on, how often people are looking at them. Mike, do you think, I guess you're agreeing with that opinion?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's all down to the role, Rachel. So from that perspective, if my role is operational on the floor, then absolutely I'm looking for real-time information, daily information, and obviously weekly information. So yeah, absolutely.
So Tracy's asked, my frustration is measuring AHT when agents come off the phone and go into a general make/busy code to finish up the call work, which can take up to an hour. How do we manage this more efficiently? They won't increase the wrap-up time. Paul, I don't know, you talked a lot about AHT.
Yeah, so agents are crafty, so they know what it is that they're being measured on, and if you've got a focus on wrap, but they are not ready to take the next call, then if they've got a different way of being able to engineer that outcome, they will actually take it. An hour does seem, Tracy, a little bit excessive. I would expect that your team managers would get some sort of alert to be able to say that somebody was not in a sort of available state, and then it's down to the managers to take action.
Okay, so we've got some tips coming through for audience members, tips on contact center metrics. Kay said, when driving improvements on a metric, be aware how it may impact other areas, e.g. driving reductions in AHT may sacrifice quality. Christine said, we use speech analytics to determine FCR, transfer calls as well, and can look at repeat contact calls based on the customer's phone number that calls in. And Emma said, a customer can call in on multiple lines. It is much better to use a customer's reference number, if possible, to tag to calls and other media channels, or similar. Otherwise, you could miss repeat contacts. So Christie's asked a question, what are the best methods of measuring first point resolution and repeat contact? Mike, I don't know whether you had any thoughts on this one.
Yeah, as the technologies get easier to kind of work together, there are tools there which will sort of, spot a sort of CLI coming through from a previous caller, for example. And, the platforms today often have that, if you like, kept in their database, and modules are there to sort of flag that. Similarly with email, if we see an email coming through, we have a look in the database and realize that we've seen this customer before, and here are the interactions that we had around those previous contacts. It's kind of steering us into the kind of omni-channel strategy, if you like, by way of the question, and often in collaboration with maybe a CRM platform. Usually that's the kind of best place to store customer contacts. And then as a contact comes through, we're able to kind of look in the CRM, and from that make a more measured assessment of, oh, I can see it's Mike, and I can see that Mike called us, chats, emails, socials, whichever way Mike may have touched our brand. So it kind of leads us in that direction. So often I would say modern platforms tend to have those measures available straight away. And then if you look more thoroughly at like an omni-channel strategy, in the combination of the contact and the CRM would give you great information.
Thank you. So Kevin's asked, what are the best practices associated with addressing ASA SLA challenges when unanticipated call volumes increase or absenteeism attrition negatively impact the customer experience, considering there is no fast turnaround solution to increasing and training staff to meet demand? Paul, I don't know whether you had any help for Kevin on that?
Yeah, so if we go back to our global airline, so when I started, it was actually the busiest time of the year, and we were significantly down on resource for the anticipated demand. We used to watch the board like hawks in terms of if we could keep the number of calls queuing to 20 or 30, then we could manage the situation. As soon as it got above 50, 60, then we needed to take action. If it got to 100, then we were really struggling. We had to take drastic action. And what came out of that was actually developing, well, we called it an operational recovery toolkit, but it's really just a grand way of being able to empower our real-time staff, or who are basically managing what's going on the floor, to take action as soon as they are empowered to take action as soon as they see something happen. So they could move breaks around at the 20 or 30 calls queuing. When it got to 50, they needed to bring more resource on, and we had, what was very successful was we had a hit squad. So in other words, we said to everyone who was trained but not frontline, so our team managers and some of our back office specialists, that for a 15-minute period you would all go on the phone, and if our calls are about 5 minutes, we wanted them basically to take 3 calls. And if we could get 15 to 20 people on the phone for 15 minutes, we could take 50 calls out the queue. And as soon as we knew that, then, and we didn't do it all the time, but as soon as we knew we had that power, and people would be accepting that, I'm not going to come to a meeting for another 15 minutes because I'm helping out my colleagues. That was okay. That became a currency that was a legitimate reason for not doing what you were planning to do. The last thing was, when the calls did get to 100, we then were prepared to be a bit more drastic. So in other words, we started to change IVR messages. One of the things was to say, if you're calling about traveling today, please hold on the line. If it's for a later date, then we are very busy. We can't get around to you straight away. If you choose to do it via on our website, or you choose to do it via or call us back later, we accepted that was a better outcome. That wasn't great. I never felt comfortable flicking that switch to make that decision, but there are times and places when it is necessary.
Thank you for that. So we're going to move on with our agenda, and delighted to hand over the baton to Mike Murphy from Genesis, who's going to take us through his presentation.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So hopefully everybody can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I've got 2 themes really in my short presentation today, and the first is sort of a challenging the kind of notion of the 80-20 rule. That is obviously a metric that has been present in my life for quite a long time, and certainly I suppose the idea of handling 80% of your contacts, if you like, in 20 seconds. It's when you think about it, it's quite a challenge really to respond to that. And when we looked at the sort of the source, if you will, or where did this rule come from, what we realized actually is that it isn't actually defined anywhere very clearly, and it may well be things of the time it takes for a customer to take 3 or 4 rings, for example. Maybe it was just something published by a particular ACD system manual. It isn't actually very clearly defined as a sort of a golden rule in this area, yet we all seem to fall back on it as a kind of a industry expectation. And when we sort of studied it more closely and sort of asked our customers what they expected, and we have some studies here from Vocal Labs, for example, they studied bank customers, and they were able to see that customers were willing to wait longer, in fact up to 2 to 3 minutes, without negatively impacting customer satisfaction. Like a large APAC company found no correlation between wait times of less than 6 minutes, which is an awfully long time, I think, but it had no correlation between the customer's NPS score or the actual resolution of the contact. So I suppose the point I'm making here really is that we should kind of relax a little bit around that sort of 80-20. It's maybe not the right ambition to achieve. Clearly the things that are important would be the sort of customer-facing measures around like Net Promoter Score, those type of things. And clearly as well, if you have VIP clients, we should remember that they are VIP clients for a reason, so therefore they should be treated accordingly. But if you kind of relax a little bit about the rest of the contacts, you should be able to sort of take a sort of a breather and sort of answer the call maybe a little bit longer, let it queue a little bit longer. And by queue, I'm talking here about, if you like, post self-service. So I've been through perhaps a an IVR where I've been identified and verified. I've been kind of maybe given some information, maybe partially self-served, but I need to speak to somebody. And I'm now talking about the time between that point and actually getting to speak to somebody. So in essence, really, the idea is don't feel that you have to kind of, if you drive for the 80-20, you're putting a lot of stress on yourself. And maybe by doing that, you're actually going to, if you like, incorrectly route the call. And ultimately, that will sort of meet your measure, but you'll probably get a poor customer experience. What you'll also probably find is that you may get the call answered, but actually the person who has answered isn't the right person to deal with the query. And Paul touched on that in his slides earlier. And in fact, if you get, if you kind of step back a little bit, think about where I'm actually pulling these calls, getting them through to the right skill first time really should be the priority. And then after that, then we look at how long am I actually waiting in queue. So that's just kind of some of the observations that we made. And the case study that we kind of show here really was based upon a Genesis customer in APAC. I think it was Australia. I'm not sure. I need to just check on that. But for them, by taking this kind of more relaxed view, instead of having this kind of urgency up front and thinking about where they're placing the calls, and remember, we're using the technology here. We will be looking to identify the customer, so we know information about you. We kind of get an understanding of what it is you want, so we know what kind of skill we need. And again, we're utilizing modern available tools. But with that, this particular customer was able to realize quite a drastic reduction in their resources teams to meet the service levels that they were pursuing. So from that perspective, think about it. I wouldn't say, if you like, I'm going to say this is a great way to sort of just take your foot off the gas and relax and not worry about the queues. I'm not saying that at all, but what I would say is the notion, if you like, of trying to achieve 80 and 20 may actually hurt more than it actually delivers value. So just think about that as far as one of these sort of benchmark standards or benchmark metrics in our industry, which in fact may be causing more damage than it's trying to solve. And then if I kind of look at the second sort of theme that I wanted to talk about, Rachel, was kind of more on the technology side, which is obviously why I'm part of the session today. I think it's fair to say that our world is evolving very, very rapidly, and I think what we will see together, if you will, as the months and pass and kind of what's coming around the corner, is that we're going to be sort of serving our customers very differently to how we've been doing it to this point. And to that end, I think we're going to start to see a lot more sophistication around self-service and a lot more choice for our customers around self-service. And certainly, technology and applications are changing those sort of expectations that the customer has. You mentioned, Rachel, that Alexa is in the background of your office, and those type of tools are prevalent within the sort of consumer base. And to that end, the customers are starting to get used to this notion of self-service and speaking to something to get an answer, and the confidence, if you will, is starting to improve on that. And with that also, their sort of expectation is kind of increasing as well. So from that perspective, whether it's about omni-channel and remembering, this is Mike and he's called us, he's texted us, he's emailed us, he's chatted with us, that's very, very important. I mean, the idea of personalization, knowing that Mike actually bought this product yesterday and may have a question about it, or he has this policy which is due to expire and therefore he may be looking to renew or to switch away. I have that data in my business. I know that information about Mike. What I haven't been able to do, if you like, effectively in the past was kind of join those pieces together and deliver something different to Mike to make him feel special being a customer of mine. So from that perspective, we're seeing omni-channel personalization, immediacy becoming very, very critical in making sure I have a great customer experience. Certainly, we have to be efficient, and from that perspective, customers are expecting, if you like, the brands they work with to be efficient. And if they start being asked questions in technology and then start being asked questions as soon as they're put through to an agent, they're the kind of signs that make me think you're not efficient. Similarly, if I'm being put on hold often, if I'm being transferred often, I don't feel good as a customer in that environment because I don't necessarily feel you're kind of on it as a brand, and maybe it starts to get me in the notion of I need to start thinking about a different supplier. But this isn't easy. Like if it was easy, we kind of wouldn't all be here. But managing the customer experience is difficult, and customer satisfaction an ever-present challenge, and churn is an ever-present challenge, and churn is a very brutal metric. But if that churn rate is going up, then we really got to get back to those root causes that Paul talked about. What is causing these things to happen? Because yes, they're slightly outside the contact center's control, but actually it's the contact center that can kind of give you the window into that beautiful information. So really, the bringing together of the contact center and the business is crucial, because both rely on each other. Often we see today that there's a lot of disconnected or aging technology out there. It's kind of the way things have happened with the downturn in 2007, and customers' budgets being cut and resources being cut. People have kind of been working as hard as they can, focused on sweating their assets. But ultimately, what it means is multiple technologies, lots of different ways to administer, complex, disjointed, difficult to train and use. Sometimes, often, there are customers that we know who are operating and they have got no skills to actually make any changes. In fact, the skills to make changes are very, very hard to find anywhere. So from that perspective, there are huge risks associated with this state. And to be fair, there are lots of brands who are in this state. Ultimately, we're looking to grow revenue and reduce costs and do more with less. They're the kind of good things around this, but often it's very hard to do that if you're being constrained and if you like, locked in by the tools that you're working with. And this is a kind of a slide that I showed before, Rachel, in one of our webinars, and it just kind of reinforces the point about what was kind of simple in the earlier days, where I was kind of dealing with voice only, and I learned to do a little bit of like the workforce management around that. I learned to do a bit of quality management and recording, and then I kind of evolved into analytics, and I started to do more smarter reporting, and maybe did some CTI, and I can remember these sort of milestones over my years kind of being part of this. We started to bring in multi-channel, chat, email, web, social, and they've all kind of come along, if you like, as sort of point solutions, really. That ultimately meant that each one of these technical platforms to solve that problem, whether it was chat or whether it was email or whether it was knowledge, they ultimately were their own little system that kind of was part of my ecosystem to provide my contact center. And the challenge about that really is that actually from the customer's point of view, these individual systems need to be working together, and then if they start to appear disjointed, the customer is going to feel that and be disappointed. So we had lots of work happening in the industry where brands were trying to sort of integrate these things for our customers and provide great sort of managed services, and we'll be able to take care of all of your sort of your requirements as a sort of a principal supplier or your managed service provider, maybe even outsourcing perhaps, all because the actual tools that the brands were using were just so complex and so multiple. But really what we sort of learned was that if you look at the after effect, the point is that multi-point systems where you've got customers being handled and treated and measured in different ways makes it very hard to deliver a consistent service to the customer, a consistent experience to the customer. And if you look at that in contrast to like the more modern platforms, these like all-in-one platforms, the customer actually never leaves the fabric of the contact center. There is one contact center fabric, and within that, whether I'm routing and queuing voice or multi-channel emails, inbound or outbound, SMS messages, social, chat, it's all within the same fabric. It's being measured the same, it's being monitored the same, it's being reported the same, which I think is becoming very, very crucial. And I think this is where, if you like, the brands who are moving more towards the all-in-one have got the edge and being able to respond to their changing customers' needs. I think also as well, as we sort of see into the future how the sort of automation is going to start to play in our lives, coping with those sort of more operational, mundane questions should absolutely be a thing of automation that kind of happens and take that load, if you like, off my operations, so that customers still get a great experience, but they're getting it a different way, either through self-service, artificial intelligence, those type of tools, smart apps on their phone, even the notion, if you like, of proactively feeding what we believe is the customer's next question. I know you, customer, I know the product you have, I know your product is due to expire soon, therefore I'm going to proactively start encouraging you to think about your renewal. That's the kind of thing that we believe that the customers are going to be expecting. So I think we have a poll here at this point, Rachel, which I'd like you to run, and I'd be interested in the feedback.
Yes, so let me just launch it now. So we're asking, how many systems do you use to gather metrics on your contact center? So 1 integrated reporting system only, 2 to 3 different systems, 4 to 6 or more than 7 systems. Mike, I don't know what you've seen a lot of.
Oh, well, I've definitely seen, I think I would expect to see 4 to 6. I would expect to see that being quite high, maybe even more than 7. I'm curious. So I might be wrong. That's the beauty of the poll, but that's what I think. That's what I think.
So we'll just give it a few more seconds. So today's poll, I think we've got 176 people voting on it at the moment.
Okay,
last chance. And we'll close it and share the results. So 50% say 2 to 3 different systems, 28% say 4 to 6, 14% say 1 integrated reporting system, and 7% say more than 7 systems. Was that kind of what you were hoping for, Mike?
Yes, I think it kind of squares nicely with those thoughts, really. I think as we, there clearly are, if you like, brands who have moved forward and kind of bought into, if you like, more modern-based platforms. And then I think as well, there's a large number there, if you like, have still got that task to do. So yeah, that squares nicely with me. And obviously, 7% that are sort of handling more than 7 systems. It's not uncommon.
So I will hand the baton back to you, Mike.
Okay. So the point I was making, if you like, before, where we had like the idea of the multi-point solutions versus the all-in-one, what it really kind of, like a way to sort of illustrate that. Let me just move the slide forward. Are you seeing my screen okay?
Yeah, we can see, we can't see your next slide though.
That's fine. Okay, so let me do that now. Okay, so this is kind of a screenshot that I just grabbed from one of our tools, and the reason I kind of wanted to show you at this point, this particular screen, is because it kind of consolidates quite a lot of the conversation that we've had so far. And if I can just move my mouse around, tell me if you can see that, Rachel. Is that coming across?
We can, yes. Okay,
so just as a an indication, if you like, of what's available when you have like an all-in-one platform. You're looking here, if you like, at work group statistics on a very sort of simple and straightforward view, and you've got some nice alerts in there, like we talked about earlier, or Paul talked about earlier. That particular customer who had agents in wrap up for over an hour. Those kind of things are a little bit of a red flag, and is there a root cause issue that's kind of causing that needs to be sort of focused on? But certainly by having the kind of alerts, I'm able to sort of look at those and highlight those to my supervisors, which is quite nice. And also you can see here, we also have tables for service level and abandon rates. So again, you can analyze those quite a lot in detail. And I suppose what I'm saying is, for the complete contact center, you have access to this information and it's there in one place. And then also you can look at it in real time, or daily, or weekly, or monthly, depending upon your focus. So I suppose that's kind of where the modern sort of tools can kind of take you to and simplify your world greatly. The other little thing I'd bring your attention to here is the workspaces over here, the top left-hand corner. And down along this sort of little list of tabs here, effectively what we're talking about with these tabs are, like I've got inbound calls, inbound chats, inbound emails. I've got outbound, again, for all media. I've got SMS. I've got the recording of all those interactions. So I'm recording the written-based tools. I'm doing quality management, or I'm able to do quality management on those tools also. The workforce management, again, is kind of looking at the same information. So I suppose my point is that instead of having multiple platforms, what you end up with all-in-one platform is these sort of simple tabs that are actually utilizing and reading from one single database, which I know is kind of technical, but it's actually the clarity, if you like, that the platform can bring to your business, because there is only one definition of hold time, talk time, wrap time. My workforce management, if you like, is consistent around all those interactions, regardless of how they present. So in that sense, it becomes very clear and very easy for me to see these are the contact center metrics I need in front of me today to make sure I'm achieving the success I want to achieve. And just a last example I'd like to show you over here, really, because at the bottom here, we're kind of able to see the particular queue for this work group, and I can see the calls that are waiting. I can see some chats here. I can see some emails. I can see a callback. Oops, went too far. But over here on the right-hand side, if you look here, this is where the real-time speech analytics becomes really helpful, because as you can see here, I've got a score around the agent conversation, and I've also got a score around the customer conversation. So again, what would traditionally have been a separate, multi-point piece of technology to give me real-time analytics on a call, here you can see it's sort of nicely consolidated within the same interface. And as a supervisor, looking at this particular number of calls waiting, I can hover over whichever call I choose and get an understanding of which words and phrases the agent has said or the customer has said, which is generating these particular scores. So it's a very kind of powerful and consolidated view. But imagine, compared to what I showed you earlier, where you have all these sort of point solutions, this is kind of the benefit of the all-in-one, because it's just in one place, very, very simple reporting, very, very clear information, and if you will, confidence that there is no misunderstanding between my handle time on chats versus my handle time on calls versus my handle time on SMS messages, for example. Okay, so hopefully that's been helpful for the audience. And with that, Rachel, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Mike. There we go. So we've had lots of questions and answers coming in and tips and everything, so we'll try and speed through everything. So Cormac's asked, which metrics do you feel are key for self-service? Mike, I don't know if you had a thought on that.
Yeah, so for self-service really is very interesting as well around metrics, because what's nice about the tools in self-service is that you can put little triggers on the various steps that the customer takes through self-service and use those to kind of validate that your application, if you like, is written correctly. So from that perspective, I suppose it's kind of more around the performance of the app or the performance of the IVR, depending upon what you've actually built, and then being able to sort of use that information to improve the performance. So I can see that the customer kind of takes this branch, and out of that sort of branch, I can see that 42% are successful, the rest are not successful. Therefore, that's an area I need to dig into. So it's probably more, if you like, performance statistics that I'll be looking for, or performance metrics around that part of self-service.
Okay, thank you very much. So Cindy sent in a tip saying, I've found that a deep dive into some of the metrics that on the surface appear to be agent deficiencies are actually problems with the information or lack of information we've provided to our team. We need to look at the analytics on many levels. Actually, she's also sent in an opinion. One of the biggest challenges in surveys is making sure that the questions are clear to the customers and that they're not answering your survey questions from a different perspective. The ability to analyse free-form comments related to the question is much more difficult. So Jessica's asked a question. At the start of a call centre, what are the most important first metrics to be concerned with? Paul, I don't know whether you had a quick thought on that one.
Yeah, so I suppose if it's a call center, assume it's a telephone channel, then you need to understand the dynamics of your demand and your supply. So demand is about the number of calls that come in, when they come in, how long they are, and the supply side is when you're rostering your agents and your ability to achieve service levels. And certainly abandonment rate is an important, very basic level, but important. So basically, it's around can you actually answer the calls? So getting through is the first element, and then it's about the actual transaction. So did you complete that transaction one and done, i.e. in a single call, and any customer feedback through surveys around did that work for the customer. I think that would be the sort of type of flow that I would start with.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Sharon sent in an opinion saying, AHT I only use as a measure if someone is underperforming. However, it has to be taken into context. Call length can depend on the customer type each agent is dealing with. Melissa sent in a tip saying, we've reworked our IVR to allow our members more detailed options when calling in. This has resulted in calls being routed to the correct department with less transfers and less hold time, which I think is great.
Very good.
So Andy's asked, I think probably a final question, how would you differentiate performance metrics for agents versus senior agents? Senior being paid more, so should be providing more value. Paul, I don't know whether you want to take that one.
So I assume that there Andy has differentiated those two roles by sort of capability. So the role of a senior agent is very much as a role model. So they may well be involved in coaching and developing other staff and supporting them with any kind of knowledge needs that they actually have. So I wouldn't expect necessarily the same throughput of work of a senior necessarily. But certainly dealing with more complex inquiries or escalations, that would be the kind of key expectation that I would have.
Okay, thank you. So unfortunately, this is all we've got time for today, but we would ask in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about the webinar? If you could share that in the chat room, that would be great. Just a reminder that the replay and slides will be available later on this afternoon on the following link, callcenterhelper.com/recorded-webinars. So delighted to announce the winning tip for today is Kay, who said, when driving improvements on a metric, be aware how it may impact other areas, e.g. driving reductions in AHT may sacrifice quality. So congratulations, and we'll be in touch after the webinar. So we're back next week with being super busy, the modern excuse for not coaching staff. But just want to say thank you very much to our speakers. Paul Wheel, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, folks. Enjoyed it.
Brilliant. And to Mike Murphy from Genesis, thank you very much for joining us as well.
Thanks, everybody.
And, thank you. And just time for me to say goodbye to everyone and hopefully see you next week. Bye.